Welcome to Negro Please. I am Dallas Scott. That is Hollywood Huff. We got Quan, the producer, in here today.
Yeah.
I guess we're changing to 5 o'clock on Mondays. Seems like a good thing to do. Today we're going to talk statistics. We're going to talk about Lizzo. We're going to talk about police. What else are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about Kobe Bryant, the passengers being blamed for the helicopter crash. This is going to be, they haven't really said why or how they're going to be what they did, but I don't know. Sports came back kind of this week.
Yeah.
UFC. Did you watch it? I haven't watched it yet.
We actually had a little UFC party here at the studio. Less than 10 people. And we sat 6 feet apart. 6 something. I don't know. 5.4.
Yeah.
But no, it was dope, man. It was dope.
What was it weird with the without a crowd?
So the entrances are weird without the crowd. But we've been covering UFC at the Contender Series. So Contender Series is very little people in the crowd, smaller room. So we already have had that experience, a lot of us. So with that, it wasn't too weird. It was just weird seeing that with like the biggest stars in UFC as opposed to MMA fighters trying to make it to the UFC.
Right.
So that was different. But once the fight started, like the cameras keyed in on into the octagon anyways.
Right. You're not right.
The biggest difference is you hear everything, every hit.
Yeah,
you hear everybody in the corners. So for that, it was different, but I actually liked it because you could hear
I heard
everything.
somebody else on Facebook, or saw somebody else post on Facebook that they actually liked the fact that you could hear what the cornerman was telling the fighter to do, and where normally you can't hear over the crowd.
And so the funny thing is, Daniel Cormier, who's one of the 3 broadcasters or commentators for it, he's saying stuff, and it's so quiet in there. He has his headphones on, so they're already noise canceling headphones. Right. So he doesn't really feel the difference of
how loud he is,
how the broadcast is.
Right.
So he's still talking at his regular level, like there's 15,000 people in the crowd. And so,
and he drops him on.
Some of the fighters said that we actually changed what we were doing because of what Daniel Cormier was saying. So he was like a 5th guy in the corner.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah.
That they were saying that they could hear his commentary. So, like example, he'd say, "Oh yeah, he really needs to try to stop this move," and then they would be like, "Oh yeah, maybe I should stop
this move."
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Where normally
Greg Hardy was one of the fighters.
Yeah.
Greg Hardy, former NFL player, was one of the fighters that said that.
Good to see him beating on men now, not women,
instead of women. But he said that he changed some things because of what Cormier was saying.
Wow.
So, like I just haven't had time to watch the UFC yet, but I watched try to watch one episode of WWE without audience.
Oh, God.
It's garbage. It's like the worst thing. Like,
and they feed off the audience.
Yeah,
And you're doing fake hits. So
right.
The crowd noise diffuses the fakeness of the whole story.
Could you see Hulk Hogan now? You remember how he used to do that thing with the crowd noise, and he would pump his fist, and he'd do the ear thing and listen. Like, how does he do that
with no crowd? The Rock is nobody.
Right.
Like everything The Rock does to get you pumped up is because the crowd is so pumped up.
Right.
Like it's like the laugh
and
track.
You forget WWE or pro wrestling was done way before TV.
Right.
They were doing shows, and that's how they exist is because of a live crowd.
Right.
Yeah. So
and there's still a lot of like smaller wrestling fractions that aren't on TV.
Yeah.
Like here in Vegas, we'll see them at like Sam's Town Casino, and they'll be doing stuff with smaller and more intimate audience. And I actually kind of like that more than WWE. I think the storylines in WWE nowadays are just garbage, in my opinion, compared to like back when there was a WW. It was the WWF and the what was it?
World Wildlife Foundation.
Right. They made them change the name, the little panda logo. But what was the other wrestling with Eric Bischoff?
AWA, there was WCW.
WCW. That was the one. Yeah. I remember I'm actually surprised. Remember when ESPN first came on? For those of us who are a little older, like. They used to do a lot of those AWA wrestling and NWA wrestling things. I wish, since there's no sports going on, they would bring some of that stuff back instead of cornhole.
They should,
or ping pong.
Yeah.
All right, today is I got into an interesting discussion on Facebook this week, and it made me do some research. And I started talking to my brother. I've talked about my brother before. He used to be a police officer. He is no longer a cop. He retired 2 years ago. So we started, it's this black on black crime thing, right? I had somebody on Facebook. I was trying to explain to people that crimes in inner city, so many of them are about poverty, not about race.
Right.
And somebody tried to tell me, well, I can show you statistics for how many black people kill black people. Show me statistics for how many white trailer park people can kill white people. So with just a simple Google search, I mean, just Google, boom, I found an article, or actually I found an FBI page. And this is gonna shock some people. And some people may get their feelings hurt by this because these are not my stats. This is the FBI. Where does my page go? Like, where did my? You have the article. Like, if you open up Messenger.
Yeah, I got it up.
Okay. So, how many white murders were there?
All right. So, race of offender, white.
Yeah.
Total was 3,005
white people were murdered.
I'm sorry. Trying to find the victim. The
victim is the first number.
Right.
It should be 3,005 was the victim. There it is. I got it. Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah. 3,005.
3,005 white people were murdered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The better stat, it's not a better stat, but I want to point this out. 2,491 black people were murdered. Okay. Black or African American.
Right.
Total. Right.
Mm-hmm.
3,005
white people
were murdered.
Right.
Of those white people that were murdered, 2,509 of them were murdered by other white people.
Right.
Which means that more white people murdered white people than black people were murdered at all.
Yeah, at all.
They don't hear me, no, right? Like, so
right.
More white people killed white people than black people were killed at all.
Right.
Think about that.
And then for black people, it was 2,491 black people killed.
But the majority was 2,245.
2,245 was the number of black people who killed.
The percentage of blacks that kill whites and whites that kill is higher than the percentage of whites that kills black.
Right.
But you're trying to tell me that it's black on black crime, and that's the problem in the cities, and white people don't kill each other. Well, according to the FBI, they do.
Yeah.
And they kill each other at a very high rate. 75% of all white people married or murdered are murdered by other white people.
Right.
So I was talking to my brother, and he was like, you got to like go into all these other stats. And so he's like, child pornography. I was like, ooh, this one ought to be good. I have this on my page. Sorry, Steve, I didn't get a chance to send you the link.
Oh, good.
82% of all people arrested and convicted of child pornography are white males.
Woo.
82%. And something that I thought was very good and very interesting, it is the crime with the highest conviction rate in the country. 98% of people arrested for child pornography are convicted.
Yeah, because either they got you or they don't.
Yeah. And it was weird because it was like 4% were white women.
Yeah.
And I guess I didn't, when I think child pornography, I think of a male crime, not a female crime.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing. And then there were some other statistics. This one kind of so the FBI has some pretty wide parameters. How many people do you think you have to kill to be a serial killer?
4? I don't know.
I think it's only 2.
It's in between. It's 3.
3, okay.
3?
I knew it was something really low. I watch a lot of serial killers.
Right. So but I think most of us think of serial killers like Bundy and these guys
10 or more.
10 or more over with the same MO over
right.
So technically, if I kill you,
mm-hmm.
if I kill Steve, and then Quan knows I killed you, and he threatens to tell on me, so I kill him,
mm-hmm.
that's 2. It's 3 within over a month. Okay. So 6 weeks later, I get into a road rage accident,
mm-hmm.
and I kill somebody else that has nothing to do with the original 2 murders.
Yeah.
Now I'm a serial killer.
Wow.
Which is to me like kind of a weird, like, it doesn't fit. But on that stat, 52% of all serial killers are white males.
Wow.
But people of color are the problem here, right?
Yeah.
Like, we commit all the crimes. 52% of all. And if you go to the higher criteria, that I was thinking, and I think everybody else was like 10 or more with an same MO.
Yeah.
It's 84%.
Wow. So the more people the serial killer is killing,
Is more likely
he's a white guy.
He's a white guy.
Yeah. I mean, that's in a sense that's kind of like common knowledge because we've all seen like the Unabomber or remember the Beltway sniper that happened to be a black guy.
Yep.
And
Lee
I
Marvell
remember
and John Muhammad.
Yeah, I remember they were saying they were looking for one guy because they thought it was just one guy. And they said he's most likely to be a middle-aged white male,
right.
Between like 35 and 45 or something like that.
And that's why they got away with it for so long.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that happens, but people always look at like black people.
Yeah, as like
we're the big threats.
It's
to
not just
society
black people; it's minorities.
Yeah, right.
So another person wanted to argue with me on Facebook, and I love when people their evidence proves me right. So he posts he goes, black people are always talking about cops murdering black people, but last year 42 white people were murdered by a cop. Only 31 black people were murdered by a cop. Of those 42 that were murdered by a cop, 6 were unarmed. Of the 31 black people that were murdered by cops, 18 were unarmed.
Right.
And that's what we're protesting here, right? But the stat even gets better.
But here's my thing too, right? So it's like when people come out with that stat and they're like, "Oh, more white people got killed by cops than black people." My first thought is, why are you okay with that?
right.
How is that an argument? Like, how is that supposed to make me stop? Like, are you missing the point? Like, why is that like acceptable?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a very good point.
Like, I never understand people who bring that argument of, "Oh, well, it happens over here too, or this gets done too." It's like, do you not realize that's an injustice or that's wrong? Like saying that it happens in other places doesn't make it okay. Like it's almost equivalent to somebody breaking into my house, me calling the police or dialing 911, and they're like, "Oh, people's houses get broken into all the time. Don't worry about it," and hang up. Like, what do you mean? Like this just got robbed.
Well, you might get arrested for that though.
Right. Unless you're in Georgia, then you might get hunted down.
No. Shannon Brown lives in Georgia, former Laker, former NBA player. He had a couple go into his house. I think he had a for sale sign on the house. They said they thought it was an open house just because he had a for sale sign. They go in. He tells them they're not allowed to be in here. He takes a couple shots, and he gets arrested in Georgia. They walk on May 2nd.
Yeah, I read about that.
Georgia's having some issues right now with this stuff, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Do we know was it a white couple? Do we know?
I'm not sure, but it sounds like it.
Yeah, definitely sounds.
I pictured a white couple.
So this stat though, that 42 white people were killed by police.
Right.
So the thing he posted lists all other minorities, right?
Right.
189 minorities were killed by police compared to 42 white people.
Right.
And people don't like when black people are protesting, we're not just protesting because we're black. We're protesting for people of color in general.
Right.
189 people of color compared to 42. People of color make up 32% of the population in this country, and you're telling me they're getting murdered or shot and killed by police at 4.5 times the rate?
Right.
That just the numbers don't add up there. That doesn't make any sense.
And this is literally why we get so upset about it. This is literally why, because it's disproportionate. And it's not just disproportionate that it happens. It's even more lopsided when you start looking at, well, where did justice come from?
Right.
Who got justice for these murders?
Right.
How many of these cops killed someone and actually did jail time or found guilty? Or, I mean, we could really just start with how many of them actually were charged with something.
Right.
And actually, you know what I mean? That's why people start celebrating when people get charged, because we're like, woo, finally, they're charging people. You know what I mean? But now it's just so lopsided that it happens. And then the scale just keeps on tipping the wrong direction. The more the stats of, okay, black victim, white person or white cop, and then, DA was white, and then you start throwing in locations like Midwest, the South. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse for a minority victim. This is why Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee. This is why you have all these athletes and rappers and entertainers and famous people just in general who are saying like, look, no, we won't just shut up and dribble. There's something that needs to be addressed here, because it's easy to overlook when you're not a minority and it's not happening to you and people you care about. It's very hard to overlook when it happened to somebody who just looked like me, and it almost happened to me myself. So thinking about these things, man, like it's one of those things in society where we have to stop and take a minute and literally put on another person's shoes and go, well, what are they dealing with? You know what I mean? Like, what kind of things are it's happening to them that may have never even happened to me? I never even thought about it happening to me. Like, these numbers don't matter. We're talking about real humans. Like, these are real people dying, which brings me back to, I don't understand how anybody could say, oh, well, it happens to white people too. Like, we know, like, we're not saying it's okay when it happens to white people. We want it to stop all across the board. So shout out again to Las Vegas Police Department for being one of the places in the country that improves, it seems like, almost every year. I mean, they have some bad moments here and there, but just looking at what police actually do, I'm not expecting every cop every day to be perfect and handle everything. There'll be mistakes. There's going to be a bad cop in there, but the ratio of bad cops to good cops should be like, it should be more good cops. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I'm expecting like 99 good cops out of 100, you know?
The cop in California and LA that had the guy with his hands behind his head, his fingers were interlocked, and all of a sudden he just starts wailing on him while the female cop is just standing there looking.
Right.
Like, there's a big blowback from the community that they want this guy charged with assault.
Yeah.
Like, or attempted murder. Like,
yeah.
There was clearly, the guy was complying.
Right.
He was defenseless when this guy just starts wailing on him. And at no point when he's being wailed on does the guy ever fight back. If you watch the video, he's covering up.
He's covering up, and I actually watched it right before I came here. He's covering up. He throws his hands up in the air. Yep. He tries to protect his face. Yes. He sticks his arms out. He does everything to try to get this cop to stop, and he's getting wailed on for about 15 seconds. Yeah. The cop even threw like a couple knees in there. And the female cop just stands there and watches. I feel like she should be, like, if something happens to him, she needs to get charges too, because at that point, what would I be charged with if me and my brother went and beat up a guy like that? What would my brother be charged with for standing there watching? So that's what she should be charged with. You see, you understand? Yes. Like all we want is accountability. I'm not asking for this dude to get the death penalty for punching a guy. Right. But goodness, man, like, you're on video beating a guy who was surrendering, who had his arms up, or behind his back or head or whatever.
There was no resisting whatsoever. You watch it, there's nothing he was doing to resist.
That's all I'm asking for. I'm not asking for every cop to get the death penalty for something. But no, you kill somebody, they were unarmed, you shot them in the back of the head when they were running away. Like, no, bro, that's murder.
Right.
You need to face the judge now.
Let's talk another statistic, because this always gets lumped in with blacks and Latinos especially.
Yeah.
6.6% of all white people between the age of 12 and 25 are likely to sell drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Only 5% of all black people between the ages of 12 and 25 are likely to sell drugs.
Mm-hmm.
You go 5.0 to 6.6 doesn't sound like that much, but it's actually a 32% increase that white people will sell drugs more than black.
And the reason why is because there's like 100 million more white people than black people.
Right. Black people are 78% more likely to go to jail for selling drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And the article, it actually made some sense. And the difference, and they believe the difference is that white people sell drugs in their houses.
Yeah.
So nobody sees them actually do it. Where black people sell drug on the street corners in the streets, so they're more likely to be seen and to be caught for it. And then you go back to,
and it's a lot of white kids that have dads that are judges.
Well, that's the other thing. You go back to the other thing too. You go back to the economical, social aspects of it, where the black kids are much poorer, and the white kids that are selling drugs,
they stand no chance in court. As opposed to,
and they have to have a public defender.
Yeah. When a black kid gets caught, it's possession with intent to distribute. When a white kid gets caught, it's just possession.
Possession, right?
You know what I mean? So he just says, "Oh, I was using this," and it's like, oh, completely different thing. Right. Possession, oh, you just get a little probation. And then intent to distribute, 15 years.
Right. And the white kid's dad has $20,000 to hire an attorney, and
Right.
he hires an attorney who's friends with the DA.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
This is his first time offense. We're gonna knock this down to a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
And tell him not to do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where the black kid's friend, the public defender, isn't really on his side. He's just trying to clear cases because he has 2,000 cases he's got to clear.
Just plead guilty.
Please
Yeah.
do this. Plead guilty. This is the best we can do. You're only going to get 6 months, but now you have a criminal record.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah. Power of attorney, people.
Yeah. My brother also I thought this was interesting. He was telling me that, and these are classes he has to take. He would take every year, and they would have these like FBI classes,
Mhm.
and they would talk about the psychology of crime.
Right.
Black people, according to this FBI psychology profile, whatever thing they call it,
Right.
are more likely to commit murder out of rage and anger
Mm-hmm.
than any other race.
Yeah.
Asians are more likely to commit murder for what they deem as a lack of disrespect or lack of respect.
Lack of respect.
Being disrespected.
Okay.
White people are more likely to plan and premeditate murder.
This all makes sense so far.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't have a group for Latinos, and they believe it's because Latinos are desensitized to murder, because it's, especially if the immigrants that have left and come over,
Mhm.
because it's such a prevalent thing, because the governments, the cartels,
yeah.
everything is shady and illegal
Yeah.
down there, that you see it so often you just don't think about it. It's
Yeah.
just part of nature. Like,
Yeah.
it's like getting up and taking a shower every day. You just see it and do it. It's not the thing.
I've heard firsthand from a few people I know. I have a friend, and some of his family's in the cartel, and he would tell me about like where they live, the city that they were in is actually controlled by the cartel, and he's got uncles and cousins who have killed people, because the cartel told him to. And I'm like, how do you deal with that? How do you know what I mean?
Right.
This is like cold-blooded murder. This isn't self-defense. This isn't like, I mean, not to justify gang violence, but at least I understand gang violence. You know what I mean? But how does someone who's not in the gang, who's not in this lifestyle, and then someone walks up to you and say, hey, I need you to take care of this person for me. And you just go, okay. And then your other cousin is like, all right, I'll start digging a hole. Like, it's just, it's what they do on Wednesday,
When I posted these original murder stats in the Facebook thread, one of the guys, he was like, no, these numbers can't be right. He's like, 300 people were murdered 300 black people murdered black people in New Orleans last year alone. And I was like, well, if you take out the heavy cities, New York and I mean, not New York, Chicago and New Orleans, the numbers would drastically decrease.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about today, and so just before we started, I actually Googled black murders 2019 New Orleans. Now, and I took his word for it because he lives in the area, so I thought he would have a better concept of what it is. Now, he thinks that it's 300, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just a simple Google search shows there were only 120 murders last year in New Orleans.
Right.
99 of them were black men or women.
Right.
So 92% of them. But it doesn't give the stat of what was black on black or white on, like, that's something they post next year when they post their stat.
I feel like when you constantly watch the news over a period of time, the numbers start to jumble together. Because I remember I was dealing in Chicago for a weekend at the Horseshoe out there. And I remember one of the guys saying it was, I think the weekend had passed and it was Monday or Tuesday. And he was like, yeah, it was 85 murders or something like that, over the weekend, South Side Chicago. And I was like, 85? Like, that's a like nice weather temperature. That's,
right.
You know what I mean? That's
right.
highway speed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's how many people got killed,
Right. Even for a city with like 14 million people, that's a big number.
You know what I mean? And he was like, yeah, last week, it was 70 something and this, and he was like, man, summer gonna be rough, and it's going back and forth, and it's like, I feel like there are certain cities like that where there's a high population of people and a high volume of crime that's basically going unchecked. We hear those numbers so much that we don't realize that other cities only had like one murder this week.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Or like
The other thing is,
3 murders in the last month, you know?
was that 85 number true? Right. Because that's
Right. That's the other thing. You know
like,
what I mean?
You see,
how many of those were murders versus car accidents? Or,
Right.
you know, it's like you start to read numbers, and sometimes like the media does this all the time. They want to sensationalize things. So, you know, they find out that 85 people died. Well, did 85 people die or did 85 people get shot?
right.
You know,
and then the other thing is they run the same. If you get murdered, if 3 people get murdered on Friday, they're going to run that story Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
right.
So now it looks like a lot more people were murdered.
Right.
When in reality, it's still just those 3 people. They just keep saying the same story over and over again.
Right.
Anybody who knows anything about Chicago, so my family lives in Chicago. So it used to be, we've all heard of Cabrini Greens. That's where Good Times was. Ida B. Wells was another project system over there. There used to be this part of Chicago they called Jewtown. It was on 13th. And Jewtown was like where you could go and buy stuff and you would haggle for prices, right? People used to joke because you could always get like 40 pairs of socks for $12. Like, it was just,
Yeah.
you know, like, and there's like, you know, you could buy electronics there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, you used to go buy car stereos and stuff there, like, and you would haggle for the price. But what Chicago did was, the first thing they took out Jewtown and they gentrified it and put up all these nice new condos and everything
Yeah.
at a higher price.
Right.
But they kept moving it south. So Cabrini Greens and Ida B. Wells were like 36th Street, 33rd Street.
Yeah.
And we all know that gangs are very territorial.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take these poor, underserved communities that have gangs,
Mm-hmm.
when they're in their communities, there's fine. There's no, like, this is our
Yeah.
block, our area. We control this.
Right.
You don't come in here, we have no problems.
Right.
But what Chicago did was they tore down all those projects. They built nice, fancy homes and condos, and they moved those people further south. So now you're taking, and I don't know if these are real gangs, these are just examples. You're taking the 33rd Street Crips,
Right.
and you just move them down to 66th Street where the Bloods.
Right. Right.
So now you've created a problem.
Yeah.
Because you move, and then there's still not enough housing for these people to afford.
Right.
So you've created another problem where poor people, they don't like, they're paying higher rent now, so they
Mhm.
can't eat. So they're stealing food. They're robbing people to get money to buy food, feed the kids, buy diapers, pay
Right.
their bills. So Chicago created this problem by taking poor Black people and Latinos and pushing them further south. And it
Yeah.
used to be like the further south you would go in Chicago, the nicer the area would get. Once
Yeah.
you get to about 87th Street and you start going like up, like 95th Street is really nice. But once you get to like the 120s, 150s, it's like really nice, you know,
Yeah,
out
yeah.
there. It's just a long way from downtown. So Chicago created this problem themselves,
Mhm.
right? And I'm not excusing the people who are doing these crimes,
Right.
but you push these people on top of each other. They can't go north because you've already gentrified north,
Right.
right? You've already made that way out of their price range to live. They can't go northwest, northeast, same thing. So
Right.
you just push them down on top of each other, and you consolidated them into one spot.
Right.
And that's where the bigger, because all the crime you hear about is always on the south side of Chicago. You don't hear about people being killed in Wrigleyville. You know,
Right,
you
right,
don't hear
right.
about people being killed out by Balmoral or, you know,
Right.
Mayweather. Like, so you don't ever hear any of that. It's always south side of Chicago.
And
But
this same thing happens all over the country. This happens in every city where people or places, certain areas, especially like downtown areas, they want to gentrify them. So they raise the rents, new people buy the buildings. Now all of a sudden, when your lease is up, you got to pay twice the amount or get out. They all know nobody in there can pay twice the amount. That's why they live there now.
right.
You know, and so now they're out, they got to move somewhere else. The issue is when you have cities that are prevalent with gangs and you do this, well, those gangs had those few blocks. Now all of a sudden they knew, look, don't cross 110th Street.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like everything north of this is ours, south of it is theirs. Everybody's good. Well, now y'all just made everybody go south of 10th Street.
Yes.
And now we're all stuck together.
Right.
So just that element alone, you talk about gangs, you talk about, you know how the average family, and I don't care if this is poor people, middle class, or wealthy people, the reason why the divorce rate is so high is because of lack of finances, lack of money. Most people divorce over the stress of finances. It may not have been money directly, but lack of money cause so much stress that little things that shouldn't bother you do. And that inherently ruins families. It destroys relationships, right? So you have a high stress, you're a do-right person, but money's already tight. Now there's an increase of gangs and drugs in the neighborhood. It's just a bad neighborhood. You used to sleep good every night. Now, you hear all these stories about somebody just got robbed again or somebody got shot. Sometimes you even hearing gunshots.
Which creates stress in your just normal everyday
Exactly.
life.
So, and all of this is just a domino effect where you go from being just fine a year later, you yourself could possibly be on drugs because of everything that's going on around you. These are things that most people, they don't even have to think about. I think in Vegas, it's a weird thing because you can drive one block and literally and you'll see a group of people who obviously look like they're on drugs. And you go 2 blocks away and you'll see $500,000 house. I mean, and then two more, you know what I mean? And you go
Vegas
2 more blocks and there's more crackheads.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's so weird out here.
Especially like Vegas, like the center of Vegas, like
Yeah.
Mayor Goodman's actual part of Vegas.
Right.
Like it's really weird because like out by where you live, they have like those hobby farms, those horse hobby farms.
Yeah.
And then it'll be like spaces and people have their horse. And then all of a sudden, like $1 million house will just pop up here on like an acre and a half land is huge.
Acre and a half of land or like 2-3 acres or something. It's just one big mansion. And then it's the house next door to him got like, a little farm or something, some horses. And then it's like 4, $150,000 houses,
Right.
which out here is like average size house.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest. I tell people all the time, people are like, what are the good spots and the bad spots in Vegas? And I'm always like, it doesn't matter. If you keep driving in 30 seconds, you'll be out of it. You'll be in a new part.
Right.
Like,
just stay out of the alphabet because that doesn't help you at all.
Right.
Stay out of the alphabet streets. So one other thing I just want to touch on, you and I talked about this last night, and it's kind of crazy, right? Because black people are the criminals, people of color are the criminals. Michael Vick went to prison for dogfighting.
Mm-hmm.
And he's out. He's paid his time. He's done his thing. And people are still trying to vilify him and go after him about this dogfighting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe Exotic kills wild tigers because they're too old to make him any money, right? He can't sell them anymore because they're not cubs. What are we talking about? Let's free Joe Exotic.
Well, Andy put a hit on a woman to get her killed.
Right.
Carol Baskin.
He paid people to kill this lady.
Like, I'm on the fence about whether or not he did that one yet, but we know he killed the tiger. So, like, but even when you add that on top, though, right? Murder of a human.
Free Joe.
right. But we're like, free Joe Exotic. But every time something Mike Vick comes up in something, people are like, oh, he's the worst person in the world because of dogfighting. But no, Joe Exotic, he just kills some tigers because, well, he couldn't make any money off them. So let's just kill them. Why would we feed them?
I mean, it's so classic to think just the way that the human mind works and how a lot of times people, they just justify their subconscious racism without even thinking about it. And we're all guilty of it, myself included.
Right.
You look at this, like, what world do we live in where we watch this show and basically it was 7 or 8 episodes?
Yeah.
And every single one, this man threatened to kill this woman probably 6 or 7 times in each of 7 shows. And we watched these shows and laughed about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
No,
we
we
watched
did.
this and laughed because of the character that this man is.
Because it was almost,
And we kind of felt like
it was fiction.
maybe that, yeah, you know? But it was
seemed
like,
too
we didn't
fictional to be
necessarily
true.
feel like she should die,
Right.
but we felt like, man, if somebody punched her in the face a few times, I wouldn't, mind. You know what I mean?
right.
She wasn't likable. You know what I mean? Like, she was basically doing the same thing that he was doing.
And
And
did you
then-
see that? So, like, she hasn't done any press since this happened.
Yeah.
And then the 2 British guys tricked her into thinking that she was going to be on Jimmy Fallon's show.
I heard about that. Yeah.
And then they like spliced up Fallon's voice and stuff to make to make it sound like he was interviewing her. And she was all happy to be on Jimmy Fallon's show and be on national TV. But she went, and then she found out she got punked. But it was, I think that's a perfect story for her.
But it's crazy how Mike Vick, and it's still unclear as to how many dogs he actually killed himself. But we know it happened on his property. He
Right.
bankrolled the whole thing, so on and so forth. The man did the crime. He did his time. He rehabbed himself. He's a whole new person now. But Joe Exotic is in jail for killing animals, threatening to kill a woman.
There's other things.
You know
that,
what I
like,
mean?
So there was an interview on one of those morning shows, the Tamara show,
Yeah.
Tamara Hall show, and she was interviewing somebody that was like, a producer of the show or something like that, and she
Mhm.
said that like there was so much stuff they left out
Yeah.
about Joe because they just didn't have time for it. Like the fact that he was running a scam, telling people that he had cancer, and was collecting. People were donating money for his cancer treatment.
Yeah.
Like this guy, for all intents and purposes, was a piece of trash.
He
So
was.
let's free him from jail and send Michael
Yeah,
Vick
there
back.
was, and I watched it, and right when I finished the series, my first post on Facebook was "Free Joe Exotic."
Right.
And here was why. It was just, I felt like, you know what, the dude is probably a shady dude, but in all honesty, does he deserve to be in prison for the rest of his life? I just didn't think so.
Because
But-
we all feel like it's weird that the two people
Yeah,
who supposedly he hired to do the murder, neither
Yeah.
one of them had to testify, right?
yeah, and
That-
nobody else of all the. I mean, you watch this show and you think everybody here is incriminating themselves. Like
Right,
everybody
right.
here is committing crimes. Like,
Right,
and they're
right.
admitting it on camera. Like,
Right,
this is a show with real people. But he's the only one that went to jail, and that just didn't sit right with me.
Right.
I was like, should he probably have done some time? Yeah.
Yeah.
But should all of them have done time? Yeah. So it's really weird, and just, and you know, we're so used to fake news and seeing documentaries that aren't real. I think there's a part of all of us too that kind of watched it and thought, that may or may not be real, but it was, you know.
Right, right.
And that's the thing, is it was just as real as Mike Vick, but yet what other reason do we have for thinking that Joe Exotic should be free but Mike Vick shouldn't?
Right.
You know what I mean? There are people right now, if you say Mike Vick, I hate Mike Vick, I can't stand him, and da 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 da. And somewhere in the rant, they always throw in, and it ain't because he's black, which to me is like, that's exactly why then. Why else would you say that? Like, my goodness, clearly, I would, if you take Mike Vick's crime versus half the players in the NFL who beat their wives and abused their families,
Yes.
I'm like, dude, free Mike Vick and lock them up.
Right.
They beat actual people,
Right.
like humans. You know what I'm saying? Like,
But we've talked about this before. We have no value over human life.
nah, we don't.
So let's switch up a little bit. This is I just got this story before we came in here, so I don't think you're familiar with it. There's a police department in Indiana
Mhm.
that will no longer administer. I don't want to mispronounce. It's called Noxalon. It's basically Narcan, which is if somebody's overdosing on an opiate, you hit them with this drug, and it reduces the overdose. It reverses the overdose to help them save their lives.
Okay.
They're not going to do this anymore. This is going to be left up to medical professionals because they're afraid of catching COVID-19.
I mean,
So-
at this
so-
point, if you're that close enough, you already got it, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, it ain't.
So we're talking about somebody's life that could be saved or not within a matter of minutes. And because you don't want to do your job because if you're so afraid of catching COVID, stay home.
Yeah.
Don't get in the car. I mean, are you not going to arrest somebody for murder because you're afraid they might have COVID?
Yeah.
This whole thing doesn't make any sense. You and I were kind of involved in a situation that was sad and weird a couple weeks ago.
Right.
We're out riding bikes. We're done. We're at 7-Eleven drinking some Gatorade. Guy comes up. Head is completely busted open. Blood everywhere.
Yeah.
The security guard panics, has no idea what to do. Like, what do I do? What do I do? So I dial 911.
Oh man.
The first thing, the 911, I give the 911 operator, I said, here's where we're at. This guy's head is busted open. He's bleeding really bad. We need an ambulance. They were like, ask him if he's had COVID-19 in the last 14 days.
And that's, oh my
Wait,
gosh.
then the second question was, ask him if he's been around anybody. I'm like, this guy's literally laying here on the ground, head
Bleeding.
busted open,
Right.
blood everywhere. And these are the, I got to believe that they have to have a protocol that if you don't know, you just follow that protocol, right? If I'm in a car accident and I'm unconscious when you come to pick me up, there's got to be some type of where you just assume I have it or whatever, and you take this protocol. Why
Yeah.
is it that important with this guy to know that he has? I mean, unfortunately, we found out that the guy did go. We got the ambulance there. The police showed up. They took him to the ambulance, but the guy died.
Yeah.
Which was crazy because I really thought he was going to die there. There was blood.
It was, when we tell you that, all right, this guy came around the corner and he was holding like a towel or or shirt or something over his face, but he had like a white T-shirt on. But it took us a minute to realize he was bleeding because there was so much blood on his shirt.
You thought it was a red
looked
shirt?
like he just had on like a red and white shirt.
Yeah.
Like it didn't look like, it looked like a guy just came around the corner holding his head.
Yeah.
But then after a minute, you see it dripping, and then he's sitting down and he's like, mumbling and moaning, and then we're looking at the security guard who's standing literally right in front of him, 5-6 feet away from him, just right there. And then the security guard freaks out.
Yeah, young kid. I think he said he was 22 years old.
Yeah, he's like 22.
Yeah, he ends up throwing up like twice because he's never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
Where's this at?
7-Eleven on Paradise and Sahara.
Okay.
Right
Yeah,
there behind the McDonald's.
and this guy, I took some pictures, but I refused to post them online. It was kind of for my own protection, or if the police needed them for whatever reason. So Dallas was already calling 911. I was like, let me take some pictures of this guy just in case, and just kind of area around.
When was this?
Like 2 weeks ago. About 2 weeks ago.
And the guy literally, at some point, before the ambulance comes, he sits down on the sidewalk and then he lays down.
Yeah.
And once he lays down, you just see like a puddle of blood coming out. You know how in the movies when a guy gets shot and there's this huge puddle of blood?
It was like
in
that.
reality, it's not usually like that, but this was worse.
Yeah.
Like it was a legit puddle. Like when he left, they had multiple towels and stuff to try to clean off the sidewalk because it was a huge puddle. And this was coming from his head. You could literally look at him and tell his head was cracked. Like there was something.
He was conscious enough to tell the police who hit him.
Yeah.
Like he knew who did it, but he would kind of like go from being conscious and being on it to where like I couldn't understand what he was saying. I couldn't tell if he was just mumbling or like if he was coming in and out of consciousness. But like at one point he was very conscious enough to say, this guy did it and he was with this person and that person and blah, blah, blah. It's like, so the police, like he was able to give an account. And when he left, we thought he was going to be okay.
Yeah, it seemed like when they came, they wrapped his head up, they put him on a stretcher and took him off. And I had this eerie feeling, but I felt good though. I felt like, okay, ambulance came, he was still conscious.
Yeah.
I mean, anything can happen,
isn't
but
that
he might
far
make
from,
it,
UMC's right on the other side of, Sahara. So.
And then we came back a few days later, and one of the ladies who was out there that night working at 7-Eleven was like, yeah, he died.
Wow. And the police came in, like she had a picture of the guy who did it, and they were looking for him, and just like, if you see this guy, kind of thing. But it was crazy. Like, the security guard, and then the police, like we asked the police, like we hang out for a few minutes, like, do we need to write a statement or anything? The police are like, no, we'll just have the security guard write a statement. Who was the last person in the world that should have been writing a statement? Because he literally was inside puking while this was going on.
Yeah, and these are the things like in all of this, like they stopped to ask, does anybody have COVID-19 and all of this, like at this point, bro, like you would never stop and be like, hey, does anybody here have the flu? Does anybody here have this disease or that disease? Like, I get that, COVID is really big right now and it is dangerous and it is a possibility you could die from it. However, that all takes a back seat to somebody laying on the ground bleeding.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you go to the hospital and you're bleeding, you're going to be seen before the person who's just like, oh, I'm having leg pains or I'm having a severe headache. I mean,
and as I'm talking to the 911 operator, I'm trying to express how much blood there is.
Yeah.
Like, and at one point he was laying on the ground and he kind of rolled a little bit and you could literally just see the meat from the back of his head just kind of like roll up with his head. It was.
Yeah, it was pretty sick.
Yeah.
But look, this is, again, protect yourself at all times. Don't expect security guards to do it. This guy couldn't even. He literally had his cell phone in his hand and screamed, somebody call 911. What do I do?
What do I do?
And I was like, somebody call 911. Bro, you got a phone in your hand. What are you doing?
Right.
Dial, bro.
Yeah.
It's at that particular moment, I was probably the most qualified person on the scene to do anything. But that's the guy that's being paid to protect people.
Right.
So if you can leave your safety and everything up to this guy who's probably making $12 an hour being a security guard.
Right. Who's throwing up when
he's throwing up when he sees blood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because like you said, I felt good that when they took him away, I thought he was going to be okay. And you and I even had this conversation that like, what if somebody else would have been there, right? Who couldn't just stop and process the situation, like the
Right.
security guard, right?
Right.
Like, unfortunately, I've been around these types of things enough in my life that it doesn't like
Yeah.
I don't have to lose my cool. Same with
Yeah.
you. Like you said, you took pictures of what was going on, a little bit of video. So if the police had any questions, you could give them the video
Right.
and the pictures while I'm dialing 911. There are so many people that nobody would have been dialing 911. They all would have been taking pictures. And
It's not like it was only us out there. It was
Right.
me, you, the security guard. There was a guy in a truck. There was the lady who worked there, and there was like one other person who was waiting to get in the store
Right.
because they were doing shift change.
oh, then the
None of
crackhead
them-
comes up.
Yeah, then a crackhead comes. Oh God,
Crackhead guy comes up and it's absolutely livid. He can't go in the store and get a beer.
man. Yeah, he's throwing.
A
He's throwing.
crackhead on Sahara Paradise. Huh? Never thought of it.
He's throwing a fit. Like I just want to get a beer. Why can't I go in there?
Yeah.
And now the security guard woke up and tries to get tough with him, and he's
Right.
like, "There's a guy dying right here. Don't
Right.
you see this guy dying?" Like,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it was
Yeah.
pretty
The
interesting.
police had to
but-
come over and send the crackhead away. It was-
Yeah,
Like, I hung up. I got mad at the 911 operator when the police showed up. I'm like, the police are on the scene. I'm like, I'm done talking to you because like I don't like this guy is dying and you're asking me about COVID-19 because that's the most important thing right now, right?
yeah,
So we all know what happened on January 20th. Kobe Bryant, 7 others passed away in a crash. Well, apparently the helicopter company now is trying to blame them. The company's called Island Express, and they say that the helicopter crash is the fault of the passengers, but they don't say why.
yeah. They're the thing. One of the things I read was they were basically trying to say a representative for the pilot who's responding to the lawsuit is saying the passengers are actually at fault. And I'm gonna read a quote. It says, "Any injuries or damages the plaintiffs and or their descendant were directly caused in full or in part by the negligence or fault of the plaintiffs, which is the passengers, including their knowing and voluntary encounter with the risk involved, and that this negligence was a substantial factor in causing their purported damages, for which this answering defendant bears no responsibility." And this is
So-
the representative of the pilot.
I don't know. Years ago, I worked for Delta on the ramp.
Mm-hmm.
The pilot has ultimate say so.
Right.
If the pilot feels that the plane is safe to fly, he flies the plane, no matter what everybody else thinks.
Right.
But if the pilot's like, "No, I'm not taking this plane off the ground. This is not safe,"
Right.
it doesn't happen.
Right.
So, and I'm not trying to place blame here. I'm not trying to do that. But for you to blame, if you're saying that they all knew the risk and that because of the fog and whatever, it is still ultimately the pilot. Like Kobe
Right.
And
Bryant,
they were never trained to know the risk.
right?
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
They can't get in the
Yeah.
in the pilot seat and fly the helicopter. They can't do that.
Right.
It's ultimately the responsibility of the person who's flying the helicopter, the plane, or on a yacht.
And
You
he
know,
takes
the-
that chance if I get fired because I'm saying no to our most high profile
Right, client.
client,
Right.
then that's what you have to do.
Right.
You
Right.
don't do it just because he said do it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too is I'm imagining that there are waivers you have to sign when you fly. And there's a risk of just something happening and a plane can crash or a
Right,
helicopter
right.
can crash, right?
Right.
And in that the pilot, the airline company and everybody involved can say, well, there's no blame.
Because
There was all of a sudden just, a meteor came out of space and
It's
hit
like-
the plane. It's nobody's fault.
it's like
right?
when a flock of geese fly into the engine of a plane and
Right.
disable a plane. It's considered an act of God. There's nothing you can do about that.
Exactly.
Like it
So
happened.
I'm imagining that the people who are trying to sue the helicopter company are saying, well, the pilot did something wrong. Maybe he shouldn't have been flying. And their representative is saying, well, if he did, it's because of the pressure that people put on him. But they knew the risk anyway when they got in the helicopter.
Right.
I mean, there's risk when you get out of bed in the
Right.
morning. There's a risk factor
Driving
when you
your car,
drive,
right.
anywhere you go.
Right.
If you walk down the sidewalk, there's a risk factor. So to say that, well, they knew the risk factor, so any negligence, they accepted it.
Right.
That's a little crass to me.
Because but the accepted risk that we take is like 2.5%, 3%, right?
Right. The accepted risk should be, well, there was no signs and there was clear skies and everything's supposed to be fine, but we were flying and we got struck by lightning.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or just something, some crazy act of God.
If a pilot
you know?
is told, I'm thinking back to like being in Delta, that we can't get the plane completely de-iced, he's like, oh, I'm gonna fly it anyway. That's not a risk that you expected to take.
Right, exactly.
That's not a risk that you expected to take. If
that's their pilot, like, got to get this paper.
If there's this fog that was said to be there, and the pilot knows he can't fly through it, that's not a risk that you signed up to take.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh, well, we have a war zone going on over here. It'll be 30 seconds quicker if we go through the war zone, but we can go around. It'll take us the next 30 seconds, but we're going to go through the war zone. That's not a risk you signed up to take.
Right.
You understand that what they call the act of God clauses, or something crazy happens that nobody could predict. Like if the pilot had a heart attack.
Right. Those are the risks that you signed up for. Like the plane just has a mechanical failure, even though it's had all its up-to-date oil changes and engine checks and everything is supposed to be working perfectly in this plane. But while you're flying, it breaks down. That's an acceptable risk because it's not likely to happen, but it could.
Right.
So
Robert on here, I call him New York. He's saying that if it was you and I, the plane would have never been taken off.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, but I also agree that as the pilot, if you know that there are extenuating circumstances, you are 100% responsible for letting that helicopter take off. And I'm not placing blame because we don't know what happened. For all we know, it could end up being an act of God clause where a bird that they didn't see hit something. We don't know that yet. We don't have the NTSB report on this yet, so we don't know. What's that?
But if it was birds, that's still not unless
it's not the passengers'
unless
fault.
the passengers had birds in their pockets and released them through the window. It won't be their fault.
Right.
But I think the thing that people miss is a lot of people kind of have this in the back of their mind, like, well, it was Kobe on there, so he was going to do anything that Kobe said. We don't know if Kobe said anything.
Right.
Everybody could have got on this helicopter, and the pilot was like, okay, where are we going? And they gave him the coordinates, which probably he already had. They already had that before they even got on.
He had to have a flight plan.
And he could have he could have just took off and been flying, and then all of a sudden, this could be a freak of nature thing that we don't know about. You know what I mean?
And
it could have been.
We don't know. Kobe or one of the other people like, hey, is it safe to fly in this fog? Oh yeah, I got this.
Right, exactly. So I've
done this 1,000 times before.
It's like everybody is like, Kobe got in and was like, no, we got to get there on time. We're going to go. Mamba out. Like that's not really probably what happened. Right. It could have been, they said it could have been one of the other parents just asking like, hey, are we going to make it on time?
How would you prove that?
You can't. Unless there's audio recordings in the black box. Yeah, I mean, other than that, like there's no, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then it would have to all be auditory responses.
Right. Well, there could have been somebody, from the helicopter company
like on the
helicopter, hearing that conversation before they all left.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like you said, it doesn't matter if Kobe said we have to take off no matter what.
Right.
It's your company. You have to stop it from happening.
Right.
If you guys came in and demanded stuff in here that I knew was dangerous or illegal, I would not let it happen no matter how much you said it needed to happen.
Right.
If Mike Tyson came in here for an interview, I would have to tell him no. I would get my bat, which I don't have around me, but I'd be scared. But I would have to tell him no.
You have to tell him no. Like I've seen it a lot, especially working on the strip and the casinos. Trust me. Some of the stories you hear about these celebrities are true. They will ask for stuff that is just not normal. Sometimes they can accommodate them. Sometimes it's like, sorry, bro. You ain't getting it. Can't do it's just, you can't do this here. It's like not going to happen.
We're extending you every courtesy, but now you're talking about the safety of other people.
Exactly.
And we can't do this.
Yeah. So
speaking of Mike Tyson, the dude's lost like 60 pounds in the last year.
Oh,
and you've seen these videos of him fighting.
Oh, he's looking good.
Then Evander Holyfield comes out the other day and says, I dare Mike Tyson to challenge me to a fight. I'm like, Holyfield is probably my favorite boxer of all time. But I'm like, bruh, sit down.
Yeah.
Go.
Look, man.
I understand you lost your $25 million mansion. You might need some money. But Tyson looks beast mode.
You
And he's 53 years old, is it? Or something like that?
53.
Yeah. It's beast mode.
I'm not saying that Mike Tyson can get in the ring now and beat up any of these young guys.
I'm not even, I would say that he could. I feel like Tyson. I feel like Tyson and Deontay Wilder would be the biggest pay-per-view fight of all time. And Deontay Wilder doesn't have enough boxing skill to fight Tyson.
Ooh.
But here's my.
I would love to see it. I'm not gonna lie.
Tyson's already said he could knock out. He would beat
this
Deontay Wilder.
is why this is such an argument, because we're talking about 53-year-old Mike Tyson or 50-plus-year-old Mike Tyson versus 30-something-year-old
I'm gonna end your
Deontay
argument.
Wilder.
Your argument doesn't hold water.
So the factor here is the age factor, the ring rust factor for Mike Tyson.
Nope.
All of these factors, but the boxing is there.
George Foreman.
But does Tyson have the will to win a boxing match?
Are you kidding me?
I've seen the videos.
If there's anybody in the world who has the will when they walk into a ring to win, it's Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson's last probably 3 or 4 fights, he was done. Like he lost those fights not because he couldn't fight. It was because mentally he just didn't feel like fighting. He was in there to get a paycheck. That's what I feel about it. Now, only because those last few fighters he fought were basically just bums, and he got knocked down and just like sat there and
I was
didn't
at
even try to get
I was
up.
at
You know
the
what I
Clifford
mean?
Etienne
So-
fight, and this is I was so mad.
That was his
Etienne,
last fight.
yeah, he at the Pyramid in Memphis.
Okay.
So these two ladies, they're kind of big ladies, like they show up as like the fight starting.
Yeah.
They were literally walking in front of me, like I had to stand up to let them to get into their seats.
Yeah.
I missed the fight. Like while they're walking by me, like you know how you gotta like scoot to let somebody else walk down the seat.
Yeah.
I missed the fight.
And see, this is what I'm saying. Like it's Tyson right now, because there was that interview maybe like a month or so ago, and it was Tyson talking about how he was like, "Look, man, I'm cut from a different cloth, man. You know, I studied Alexander the Great and XYZ," and then he starts crying, and he's like, "Look, man, like I was a straight killer. That's why it's never been a boxer like me. I buried that guy. I don't want to be that guy again. You know, because if I just start thinking about being that guy, like
I
people
bet
gonna
he
get
finds
hurt.
that guy for $100 million.
I mean, I know that he could find that guy, but
why
Can he
does
find that
it
guy?
necessarily have to be that guy though? Because mentally he's in a different place.
Right.
So I think he could
And-
be that boxer without having to be that guy.
and I think, but
And here's the thing:
See,
if you're
that's the
if you're
question,
Deontay
right?
Wilder, you do not want to be the guy that loses to a 53-year-old Mike Tyson.
No.
I
Because
think
his career would be done if he
Who
did
did
that.
George Foreman take the title from?
was it Michael Moore?
Michael Moore.
Michael Moore. Yeah, Michael Moore's career was effectively over.
Well, he wasn't a huge name at the
Right,
time.
right,
Anyways,
right.
he was kind of like a lot of people. He was a fluke champ
Right.
to
Yeah.
begin with, but
Some
But it's-
people think Deontay Wilder's a fluke champ. They think
Yeah.
he's a puncher who can knock people out, but he can't fight.
Well, the thing is so anybody can of course get in shape, right?
Right.
With age, you're going to lose a little bit of power, a little bit of speed, a little bit of your defense because you can't take a punch as well as you could when you were in your 20s, right?
Right.
And Mike Tyson's prime was like when he was
But
started when he was like 19,
we're talking about
right?
normal people. We're talking about
Yeah.
normal people.
Yeah.
Normal people at 42 years old can't sling a football field 60 yards down the field.
That's very true.
Tom Brady's still in the NFL making $25 million a year.
That's true. True.
Normal people.
I mean-
we're not talking about guys.
I understand that Tyson is not a normal person in any way, shape, or form, right? I mean, I watched the workout videos, bro. Like, I'm a huge Mike Tyson fan. Like, I followed this.
I think that's why everyone's
Like-
thinking if anyone can, he will be the
Right.
50-something
I
to do
think
And
it.
here's the-
physically, he could get himself in shape, get in the ring, and put on a really good fight.
He has to end it in 3, though.
But that's the thing is, even in his prime,
he
he
could.
couldn't take it deep into 6, 7, 8 rounds. You know,
If you get a guy like Deontay Wilder who can't fight, like I think Tyson eats him up in 3 rounds.
I mean,
I think if you get somebody like Tyson Fury, who's a little more boxing savvy,
A
He
lot
could-
more. Yeah.
he could stretch him to 4 or 5 rounds, and that would give Fury the advantage. And Fury takes a better punch.
I just here's my only thing about anybody taking a punch. Nobody's taking a punch from George Foreman. Nobody's taking a punch from Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Like there have only been a couple people who Mike Tyson landed solid shots against, and they kept fighting.
Which
You know what I mean? Like, and you know what I'm saying. So even at 50 something, I mean, the bombs only get harder. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like he may not be able to throw as many, but in those videos, he's still throwing them bombs starting with his
Forget
feet,
about the
man.
bombs.
Like
he's got speed still.
his body is
hand
moving, bro.
speed is ridiculous.
I mean,
And who would you like to be the guy to get in Tyson's face and tell him that he can't win?
no, bro. I'm
Like-
not
like, if
everything I'm
people
saying
start-
right now. I wouldn't say to his face. You crazy? Like, dude,
Like so many people, like
man.
the experts will be like, "Oh, Tyson can't beat him. He's too old. He's too old." And I feel like the more Tyson hears that, the angrier he gets, and we see what happens when Mike Tyson gets angry.
Man, I don't want to.
I also feel like Deontay Wilder won't take it seriously, like he would. Like I don't think he took Tyson Fury seriously the second fight.
That's possible.
And then you're gonna get
mean-
inside. There's a video on YouTube of Mike Tyson's like knockouts, and every one of them comes with this like ridiculous body shot where like you like when he hits them in the body, you can see like them just give up in their eyes, and then it's over the top with the hook to the head, and the fight is over. But
Who was it that Tyson fought the night Tupac got killed?
ooh, at MGM,
I watched the interview about
I'm gonna
that
look it up real
that
quick.
guy. I can't remember his name, right? It's around the tip of my tongue. And he was talking about he was basically giving like his replay of the fight, and they were showing the fight, and he's doing commentary on it.
Bruce Seldon.
And so I believe it was the first knockdown. Tyson didn't even hit him. Literally, his fist just went in front of his face so fast, and he was talking about how he just felt the power and the speed from it. He was already nervous and scared, and so he went down. You know what I mean? And then the second one actually connected and knocked him down, or it was maybe the first one knocked him down. The second one he just fell because he was scared. But anyway, after he felt the second one, he was like, "Okay, that wasn't so bad. Like I actually tasted this punch. Like all right." And then he got knocked out.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it was literally like he fell out of being scared. Then he took a punch, and then it was over.
Right.
You know, a guy who hits like that, man. I don't know. He has so many knockouts within the first 3-4 rounds. Even if it wasn't a knockout in 3 or 4 rounds, the fight was over. Like you knew,
Right.
okay, this guy, the other guy's gonna have to.
I mean,
get lucky,
Tyson coined the
you know?
phrase. He goes, "Everybody's tough until they get hit."
Yeah, you know. So to count him out, nah. Could Tyson beat any dude on the street? Probably 90%. Probably 100% of untrained fighters Tyson could fight and just going heads up.
I would.
You know what I
take
mean?
95. I wouldn't.
and
I would.
beat.
If I was
You know
a
what I'm saying?
professional boxer, I wouldn't want that fight.
But that's what I'm saying.
It's going to
like,
be a big payday if he does somebody like Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury. It's going to be a massive payday. It'll be bigger than.
It'd be the biggest pay-per-view ever.
Ever. And I'm paying $200 to see this fight. I'm not even gonna lie. Like I might pay $5,000 to go sit at the very top of T-Mobile or the MGM Grand Garden Arena to see this fight. I mean,
I'm watching it. I'll pay to see it. I'm gonna be nervous for Mike Tyson the entire time because he's 50 something, man. Like I know with all the facts involved, he's still 50 something.
But
Like,
what if he
that's-
comes back and fights? Because we don't know if he's going to get a top boxer if he makes a comeback, right? He might have to fight somebody in their 40s
Right.
or 50s.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, Holyfield said he would do it. I'm
Right.
not sure if he said it through an interpreter because it's hard to understand what he says these days. But I mean, he's last fought in 2011. He was still fighting
Right.
quite
Yeah.
a bit in his older years, in his late 40s. So if it was something like that where they have another fight, but there's a lot that would have to be done. But I mean, Rocky Balboa did it.
Yeah.
So if Rocky
Yeah.
could
I
do
mean,
it,
if that was, I'm trying to find out how old George Foreman was when they fought in 1994, and Foreman was born in
Foreman was like 40, right?
49. He was so 49, 94. He was 45 years old, right? Is that right?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, 94 would have been 50. So yeah, he was. Yeah, 40.
He was like 40,
46
in his 40s.
Yeah, 46 years old. I think
mean-
that Tyson's a better fighter than George Foreman,
100%. But
and the shape he's in right now. Like if you'd have told me a year ago, Tyson, the guy that said he was smoking 40 pounds of weed a month,
yeah.
I'm not laying that out. But the Tyson we see right now,
maybe.
Bruh.
Maybe.
Yeah, so George Foreman was 45, and Michael Moore was 26
Maybe
when they fought.
maybe 40 pounds of weed did some cellular rejuvenation in Mike Tyson, and
I don't know.
I don't know, man.
I feel like, and the other thing.
So now we're saying is a 45-year-old or 53-year-old Mike Tyson better than a 45-year-old George Foreman was?
I would.
Ooh.
I mean,
I would say yes.
Yes. And the other thing is,
Foreman was throwing those punches super slow.
I feel like Deontay Wilder would be disrespectful, like in the interviews and the stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's kicking the hornet's nest, right? Like you can't be disrespectful.
Oh, man,
you have to recognize the guns.
Well, you can't even beat Tyson in the trash talking section,
Right,
dude.
right,
This
right.
dude said he was gonna eat Lennox Lewis kids. Here's what's funny: Lennox Lewis ain't even have kids. like, dude.
right. Like, yeah.
Man, dude,
No.
my defense is
I
impregnable.
feel like if you tried to get so many people have tried it in the past. What was the dude's name that came in with all the gold chains on and they got in a fight at the bar. I can't remember his name. And then he was so disrespectful to Tyson and talked so much trash. They got in the ring. The fight lasted like 48 seconds. Like it was over.
Yeah.
Like, but that fight was over after the bar fight because once he got hit by Tyson at the bar, like he knew he couldn't win that fight.
And that
He
was Mitch Green.
Yeah, Mitch Green. Yeah, he was just trying to like get his money.
And some people know too. They have that 15 seconds in the spotlight.
Right.
So talk as much junk as you can because I know
Yeah.
I know this isn't going to end well.
Right.
Yeah.
One other thing we'll talk about, then we'll get out of here. So Black Twitter is in a rage because
Surprise.
they're debating why Jill Scott gets more love than Lizzo. For me, this isn't a comparison to like. I feel like Jill Scott does what we call R&B and urban music. I don't think Lizzo does. To me, Lizzo does pop music.
Yeah.
I think we're comparing apples to oranges, and they're trying to compare them because of their body sizes and stuff. And I also think that Jill Scott has always been kind of elegant and
Yes.
we call Jill Scott classy.
Classy, very
Right.
classy.
And I'm not. And Lizzo has the right to do whatever she wants to. She wants to wear two-piece bathing suit. She can do whatever she wants to. I don't think showing your ass at the Lakers game is something you should want to do and you should do. But that's on her.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're comparing apples and oranges here, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know Lizzo could actually sing until she was on Saturday Night Live. Like she does that poppy,
Yeah.
music. Like to me, she reminds me a lot of Katy Perry. Katy Perry, if you listen to her sing, like when she's not on her records, she has a great voice, but she just does all this poppy stuff, and you can't really tell how well she can sing.
Right.
Jill Scott, that girl sings.
Right.
Like she's on a whole another level as far as we've seen.
Right.
And I think comparing them is, first of all, why do we have to compare them? Why do we always have to do this comparison thing? Like the LeBron, Michael, LeBron, Kobe, Michael. Like, why do we always have to do that? And second, like, if you're going to compare things that are equal.
Right.
Like Jill Scott and Jennifer Hudson to me would be a better comparison. Jill Scott and Erykah Badu, those are better comparisons.
Yeah.
They're much more similar.
They're in the same genre of music,
Right.
if you ask me. You know what I mean?
I want to put this out there for people in the Academy Award, the Grammys, American Music Awards, iHeart Awards, whatever your award show is. Just because somebody's black does not make them an R&B artist. It still bugs me to this day that Tracy Chapman won Best R&B Artist Grammy. Tracy Chapman was never, because she's black, but she was never an R&B artist. She's phenomenal. I love Tracy Chapman, but she was never an R&B artist.
It's like if I remember there was a big dispute like back in the late 90s when Eminem was first came out and he was big, and a lot of like alternative music stations would play his music.
Right.
And it was like, this is not alternative music. This is rap. This
Right.
is hip hop. Why are you playing Eminem and not Dr. Dre?
Right.
Or Method Man or anybody else, but you're playing Eminem. And so there's a lot of what we talk about, the racism that people don't want to recognize, but a lot of times people, because they're black, they get lumped into a certain category. Like you said with Tracy Chapman, when her music was clearly like not R&B music.
Right.
And even if they made one song that could have possibly fit into an R&B category, in most instances, that's not the case.
Right.
They just lump these people into a group. Jill Scott and Lizzo, nothing the same. Like there's nothing similar about them except they're two black women
Right.
who make music. So whose volume just
That's
came up?
me.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
Not
I'm like,
doing-
man, I just said that. How does?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, and then we don't have to compare everything, man. Sometimes you can just enjoy stuff.
Right.
Guess what? You have the ability to buy a Jill Scott album and a Lizzo album and bump them back to back and like both of them. You know what I mean? Like you don't have
No
to choose
way.
one or the other. You don't have to like Lizzo or Jill Scott. You can like both. I only like one of them, but I hope I wish both of them all the success in the world.
Their music,
You know what I
just
mean?
isn't this to me like Jill Scott talks about relationships in real life. Lizzo talks about partying.
Yeah,
Like it's not the same. Like
yeah,
I'm trying to think of some like who you could compare them to. Like to me, the better comparison is Lizzo to Katy Perry because they both do the same type of music. They sing
Yeah.
about partying, pop music. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
it's not not the same. I don't know.
yeah.
So we're gonna do Monday nights at 5 p.m. from now on, right?
Yep.
5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. All right, we thank you guys for joining us. I am Dallas Scott. That is Hollywood Huff. That is Quan, the producer. Got any ideas for shows? Hit us up on Instant Messenger. If you know us, send us text. This has been Negro Please. See you guys next week.
Peace.